What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And okay, we had a little bit of a replay there in the background, but welcome to our show. It is Thursday, September 19th. Sure happy it's Thursday, sure happy it's Thursday, sure happy it's Thursday. And the interesting thing is, when I got up this morning, I just put on this T-shirt, which I got in Hawaii, and it says, "I survived the Hawaii ballistic missile." And it's a reference to that very ugly incident where the emergency warning system in Hawaii was activated with a message. And apparently it has happened again. The police department was training a new dispatcher on live equipment, and they sent out a warning of an imminent tsunami. And it took them 12 minutes for the state agencies to confirm to the public it was a false alarm compared with the 28-minute delay for the ballistic missile. So, boy, oh boy, that's kind of a rough thing. So I just thought it was so funny that I had worn this shirt, and then we get this news story. All right, let's get into some more serious stuff here. First of all, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, and observations. Israel's elections are pretty much over. They got a few more ballots to count, but at this point, the results are pretty much in. And Benny Gantz's party nudged ahead with 32 seats to Netanyahu's 31 in the 120-member Knesset. And both parties actually fared worse than they did back in April, when each one secured 35 seats. But the Israeli people have kind of sent a message that they think it's time for Benjamin Netanyahu to go, to be fired, to be pink-slipped. And apparently Benny Gantz, who's never been close friends with Netanyahu, feels exactly the same way. He's saying he's going to form a unity government without Netanyahu. It will exclude the current prime minister, and that basically signals the end of Bibi's era. And now, of course, he's going to have to face those corruption charges. But there was a lot of shifting of political parties, and apparently enough Arab politicians got in where they may be the new opposition, which I think would probably improve things a little bit. So, and of course, this is going to impact Donald Trump, because Trump relied on Netanyahu for a lot of political support. And now that is pretty much gone. And so this election is going to have repercussions all over the world, especially in Washington, D.C. So the only positive fact is the Palestinian Israelis, according to Netanyahu, the Arab hordes who want to destroy the Jewish state, they voted to eliminate him. The Palestinian parties and the anti-Zionist communists who joined the alliance achieved very pleasing results with about 13 Knesset seats. So if Benny Gantz approaches them, he can form a coalition government, and he doesn't have to involve the Likud, and he doesn't have to involve Netanyahu. Gilad Atzmon wrote an article today, The Only Jewish Ghetto in the Middle East, talking about the results from the elections, saying that, yeah, the Jewish state is an ultra-nationalist right-wing swamp. It's more hawkish than ever, as long as they get the free weapons from the United States of America here. So, anyway. Now, Benny Gantz himself is in a little bit of trouble up in a Dutch court in The Hague. Palestinian Dutch citizen Ismail Ziada is seeking justice for Israel's killing of 6 members of his family during its 2014 assault on Gaza. Now, Ziad Gantz, who was the Israeli army chief at the time, and Amir Eshel, then the Air Force chief, responsible for the decision to bomb the family's home in the Al-Barij refugee camp. So we'll see if that sticks or not. But Benny Gantz looks like he's on his way to being the new prime minister with his blue and white party. Anyway. All righty. According to the Gulf War report, the U.S. is starting preparations for a war with Iran. They're just going to go ahead and move forward and say Iran was behind all of this. Now, here's something that's interesting. I saw some more photos of the weapons, or the remains of the weapons, that Saudi Arabia put on display. They're marked with English code numbers, serial numbers, abbreviations, which I don't think you would find in weapons made in Iran or made in Yemen. So again, raises the possibility this thing was a false flag stunt to create a pretext for war with Iran. There were a lot of people who were pointing out it didn't look like there was that much damage to the petroleum facilities. Plus, the targeting was pinpoint. And there's the fact that these drones and missiles just blew through all of Saudi Arabia's defenses. Which, by the way, Russia's weapons salesmen are already exploiting. Going and saying, the U.S. Patriot couldn't save Saudi Arabia here. You want the S-400. They miss a trick. Old Putin's already out there pushing more of their weapons. Now, Iran's foreign minister is threatening all-out war if the U.S. or Saudi Arabia launch military strikes in retaliation for the drone and missile attacks on Saudi oil sites. Javed Zarif told CNN Tehran hoped to avoid conflict, adding the country was willing to hold discussions with its regional rivals Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. But the top Iranian diplomat rejected any talks with Washington, D.C. unless the U.S. ends the sanctions, as promised under the 2015 nuclear deal, which President Trump pulled out of last year, triggering this escalation. Okay, we're going to take a phone call now. Jim in Illinois, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. A couple of things. The Fed had to give the banks more money last night. Did you know that?
Yes, they did. Yes.
Yeah. And the other thing, this story about this intelligence officer who was very disturbed regarding a conversation that Trump had with a foreign prime minister or president, and he blew the whistle on the conversation, and now I guess the inspector general wanted the Congress wanted him to testify, and he said no. What do you make of this story?
I'm not sure. It looks like another ginned up reason, to harass President Trump. And again, we know that the New York Times, when they ran that story about the Russian agent or the agent in Russia who had to be extracted, they misrepresented the facts because they said this agent was pulled out because of concerns about leaks coming from Trump's administration officials. But the reality is this spy was extracted quite a while ago because of leaks coming from the Obama administration.
Mm-hmm. But this whistleblower stated this is something that happened over the summer, and I asked myself, if Trump didn't do anything wrong, why doesn't he just show the transcript or the recording exactly who he was talking to and what the conversation was?
Well, my guess is that Trump, especially when he's dealing with Israel, is probably saying a lot of things that they don't want the American people to hear.
Even though we do have a right to hear that?
Well, we're supposed to have a right to hear that. We're supposed to have a transparent government, but our government is less and less transparent. And I'm going to have more on that very topic in a little while.
Okay, then. Well, I will let you go. I'll be listening. You take care.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open again. 800-313-9443. And getting on back here. Now, apparently somebody over at Fars News wrote an editorial which stated that the goal of the attack on Saudi Arabia was to bring down Donald Trump's 2020 presidency. And so this thing is getting murkier and murkier. It's almost like Saudi Arabia is admitting it was a false flag and they did it to themselves. Again, looking at the remains of the weapons that were put on display by Saudi Arabia, the markings are all in English. They look like they're NATO weapons, to be very honest, which would certainly explain, how they were able to penetrate Saudi Arabia's air defenses. And in all possibility, if Saudi Arabia was in on this, they just shut it all down. But again, Russia's weapons salesmen are already out there around the world saying, see, that the American air defense systems don't work. Need ours. All right, we're going to take another phone call from Joe in Tennessee. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, that previous caller brought up the topic of that person with spying on Trump, because that's basically what it was. The intelligence service is not supposed to spy on an elected president.
Nope.
It's just another example of why Trump has to clean house. They need to be arrested now. Brennan and Clapper need to be in chains. And an example needs to be made. I mean, FDR, if he's at war, we got people saying, oh, he's talking to Churchill. You know what he said? To make political points and to make him look bad. I mean, this is incredible that they're still doing this. And I hope it lights a fire under Barr and gets these roots. These deep state people are not going away. Trump has to destroy them. But what I'm calling about first is Corey Lewandowski and the congressional hearings. I've called many times and said, keep the congressional hearings go. I mean, it's first of all, it's a way for Republicans and Trump to get his message out to people that normally don't carry his message, like CNN and MSNBC.
Yes.
They put it on TV to watch Trump's aides squirm, and meanwhile, his first 5-minute speech just blew the whole collusion delusion away and made the Democrats look like fools. And I think even Pelosi's waking up to the fact that these hearings are being used because the public really does. Most of the public gets their news from the news, the mainstream media. They don't really know what really happened. And the Republicans are starting to just propel their own version of what happened, their propaganda, and getting it out into the mainstream. And I think Pelosi's finally realizing the game they're playing. And with Lewandowski, what I loved about him was his contempt for them.
Yes.
His contempt for them. And this is what I love about Trump. You'd never have an aide to Bush or any Stout or Romney. You never would see that contempt towards the Congress. And they are contemptible. They should be held in contempt. They should be talked to in contempt, what they're doing. And you wouldn't see that. And Trump is really, that's what, I've always said, he's brash. He can be rude. People get angry about him tweeting or doing things that are so-called unpresidential. But when you deal with these bagel salesmen from Brooklyn, these Sheila Jackson losers, you got to treat them with the contempt they deserve because they're contemptuous. You don't have to be respectful to people that are such slime. And I just love it because this is what the right has missed for a long time. To treat these, don't worry about the PC stuff. Let them call you racist all day long. I mean, Trump has a rally in New Mexico. 40% of the people there are Hispanics. They're waking up to it. Most Hispanic people don't want their kids being taught about transsexualism, and they want their boys to be boys. They don't want an abortion on demand. So it's great to see. I wish he'd go to Detroit and have a rally where a bunch of black folks are, because why shouldn't black people be start liking on Trump? I mean, he's done a lot for them, and let them see through the charade and the conditioning.
I don't think it's an issue that Trump is doing a really great job so much as the fact that people are they're getting turned off by the Democrats, by the Democratic approaches, what they're saying at the debates, this constant hammering of far left PC, and as you pointed out, transsexualism and all this other stuff that's being forced into the schools. And I think it's a case of the American people not really liking Trump, but they dislike the Democrats a lot more.
Well, I work on ships and I work with a lot of black guys, and our politics are a lot different. But like on issues like transsexualism and things like this, we totally, we're buddies. And I really actually get along very well with black people because I'm honest, and they like that. And when I was giving out the 9/11 DVDs on the street corner in Daytona, the black people were a lot more receptive to taking DVDs because they've been screwed over by the government for a long time. And if they identify with Trump as far as the way he's being treated, because everybody can see the way he's being unfairly treated. The black people aren't blind. They're it's just they're supposed. It's like labor. It's like the labor leaders are all corrupt Hillary fans, or the guy on the floor and in the shop, he's all pro-Trump. And it's black people, I think, are a lot like that. I think it's their leadership and the people that the black faces you see on TV, they all spout all this nonsense. But if you meet if you work with them and you hang out with them, you find out, hey, they think a lot like me. Just you don't really get to know that. So I think that Trump is really doing a great. He's kind of like, everybody gets exposed somehow. There's some like magic about Trump. He's an agent of the apocalypse, the exposing of the secrets. Everybody seems to just show who they are around Trump. And when he went to California, that was a real shot across the bow of the Democrats. I mean, that's a one-party state, and he's going out there. He's going to be raising a ton of money out there and giving Republicans out there a little bit of hope. And I think this is a wonderful tactic. And I think New Mexico scared the hell out of the Democrats, and it should.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of Hispanic people. People talk about, illegal aliens coming here and they're going to be an arm of the Democratic Party. Well, I mean, some of them might. But I think when they've been here a while and they're working and their kids are in school, I think they're going to go, because most of them are Catholic and they're conservative.
Yes.
So I mean, once they get assimilated, I really think that they'll be just like, everybody else. If anything, I think they'll be culturally definitely more on the side of the Republicans.
Well, California, like Texas, is now in play. The 2018 midterms came as a real shock to the GOP at how many districts flipped from red to blue. So Trump definitely needs to get out there and press the flesh and rally the voters out there. And he's got to do something about Texas too. If he loses Texas, he's not going to be president any longer.
Well, I think Trump's got a lot more surprises. Once again, I think Trump is sitting back holding all the cards, and I think that he's going to play them as he needs them. But he's going to wait till the pot gets bigger. I mean, if I was sitting in Trump's chair right now, as long as I got Barr to go ahead with the D-class and start looking into a lot of these corruption issues, I mean, he's just going to. I think it's a slow drip, and it's slowly going to come out. And I think the more, just let him keep exposing himself. By the time the election comes, the media is going to have no credibility left.
Yes,
none.
Well,
and,
they have very little right now.
Well, they have hardly any. And Nadler, his committee, I mean, basically Lewandowski just destroyed Nadler. Nadler's probably going to get primaried and lose because he's, the left doesn't tolerate losers. One thing about him. And I kind of agree with that position. I think, like I said, it's great to lose on principle, sort of. I'd rather win, and if I have to fight dirty, because that's how you get your principles implemented. So I always say that's what I love Ron Paul, but Ron Paul was too nice. You're dealing with look at the Judiciary Committee. That's what you deal with.
So was Biden in 2016. Anyway, Joe, got to let you go. Got to take a break.
Thank you.
Commercial. We will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here and getting on back to the news here. Interesting little article basically laying out that if Yemen is able to launch these kind of attacks into Saudi Arabia with or without Iran's assistance, it's sending a signal that the time has come to end the war in Yemen and to stop the U.S. economic warfare against Iran, because things are getting very serious. And we're looking at a potential for World War III. Now, Iran and Russia have formed this alliance, which means if we go into Iran, we'll be in direct conflict with the Russians. That would be a bad thing. Okay, over in Syria, Idlib is still a major hub for the U.S.-backed militants. It's a key stronghold. And over the past years, anti-government armed groups suffered defeats all across the country and withdrew towards northwestern Syria. So the decision of the Syrian army to allow encircled militants to withdraw towards Idlib enabled the rescue of thousands of civilians who were being used as human shields. But now, of course, they're all piled into Idlib, and that suggests that at some point the Syrian Arab army is going to go clean Idlib out. By the way, somebody sent me this search from DuckDuckGo. Photographs of the damage done to Raqqa by the U.S. war. And it's an eye-opener, and people need to see. These wars aren't clean. They're not neat the way the movies try and make them. There's a lot of destruction, a lot of damage, not just killing civilians, but damage to infrastructure, damage to buildings. Places are in ruins. Every place the United States goes into, they wreck the place. Okay. Now, getting back to Syria, apparently Russia had several agreements with Israel about exactly where they could carry out airstrikes, and Israel, being Israel, reneged on those agreements and started attacking positions that were supposed to be off limits. So Russia reportedly has given Syria the green light to use the S-300 system against Israeli warplanes. That is going to really ramp things up. Now, the danger here is that Israel is flying the F-35, which is this hideously expensive and not very good warplane, $1.5 trillion to develop it. And if Syria were to shoot one of them down, that would be it for the F-35 sales internationally. Nobody's going to buy a plane that costs that much and can get shot down. It's supposed to be stealthy, but apparently Russia's newest radar systems are able to overcome the stealth. Apparently up in Afghanistan, there was a U.S. drone strike, and they hit basically a pine nut farm. And they hit it after dark. 200 farmers were just relaxing for the night. And all of a sudden, the U.S. is dropping Hellfire missiles down from drones in the sky and just blowing these people up. 30 pine nut farm workers in Afghanistan were killed. And I don't think a pine nut farm represents a legitimate military target. What would be the purpose outside of terror? What can I tell you? All right, China has ordered 150,000 anti-riot officers to be stationed near Hong Kong to get ready for action ahead of the country's National Day, which is October 1st. And they're trying to send a message to the anti-government protesters that they are likely to get hurt if they don't calm down. We'll see what happens on October 1st. China is still convinced that the U.S. is behind this. And let's see, should be, no, we still got a little more time here. Apparently, China and Russia are having a large military drill. And China is sending strategic bombers, tanks, and 1,600 troops to Russia for this drill, which also includes forces from the regional members of the Collective Security Treaty Organization and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. This includes India, Pakistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. They're obviously working at learning how to coordinate these armed forces from these multiple nations. I imagine things are a little tense between the Indian forces and the Pakistani forces. Everybody's tooling up. Everybody's getting ready for a big one. Okay. Another article on the F-35. I think I've already covered that well enough. The F-35 illustrates a problem with weapons procurement in this country. And that is the way that it's handled with subcontracts going into all these voting districts. The project eventually becomes unkillable because Congress can't cancel a program without taking jobs away from their own constituents. And they don't like to do that, especially with an election coming up. All righty, let me just type a message to our control room. So these projects take on a life of their own, and it can be very, very hard to end them. Okay. All righty. Just talking with our control room here. All right, let's talk about our domestic politics here a little bit. And I'm not in agreement with this. People are starting to ridicule Biden's mental deterioration. Some are saying it's dementia. Certainly coming out with that comment about creating jobs for 770 million women in a country with a population of only 330 million. Biden keeps saying these bizarre things. And a lot of people are really wondering about his real mental condition here. Now, former President Jimmy Carter, who is himself now 95, is saying there should be a presidential age limit, past which it can be assumed their minds are starting to go. And I think he said something like 80 would be a good number. And, of course, Biden and Sanders are already over that limit. But, yeah, definitely need some young blood in this presidential campaign. Speaking of young blood in the campaign, the de Blasio campaign is basically on life support. They had a poll in New York. He didn't even get 1%. So we may see him drop out of the race very, very soon. All righty, U.S. Attorney General William Barr has invoked the state secrets privilege to cover up Saudi involvement in 9/11. And apparently the Trump administration is taking extraordinary steps to continue the 18-year cover-up of Saudi government involvement in the September 11th, 2001 terror attacks. And Barr has declared there's a reasonable danger that releasing the report would risk significant harm to national security. Meaning, if we release this report, everybody's going to know that the U.S. government lied. I mean, if Saudi Arabia really took part in 9/11, why didn't we bomb them? Why did we go into Afghanistan? Why did we go into Iraq when even George W. Bush said that Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11? So, if the report came on out saying that, yes, Saudi Arabia was involved, Americans reading it would say, okay, why has this been kept from us? for all these years, and what else is being kept from us. Right now, the American people are developing a healthy skepticism. They're developing their analytical skills. They don't trust everything the government says. They don't trust anything the government says, or for that matter, the corporate media, especially after that spectacular fail with Kavanaugh. Now, Department of Justice Inspector General Michael Horowitz confirms he's currently in communication with the U.S. Attorney from Connecticut, John Durham. And apparently he revealed this when Horowitz testified before the House Committee on Oversight and Reform yesterday morning. Now, we don't know what he's in communication about, but I have a question here. Where is the McCabe indictment? It's been a week since the Inspector General's final report on McCabe went over to the Department of Justice. And everybody's saying, yeah, there are crimes in there. Now we're finding out that the Inspector General wanted to charge James Comey for criminal activity that he kept committing. And that never happened. So I'm waiting to see what Barr does with McCabe, because I have a feeling he's going to find some way to just say, nah, we can't do this. We can't ruin this man's life here. All right, we're going to take another phone call. John in Michigan, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I'd like to talk about why we went into Afghanistan.
Okay.
I have a friend whose son was on the Carl Vinson, the aircraft carrier.
Yes.
And they were stationed off Afghanistan 3 weeks before 9/11.
Yes.
And they were all out doing sorties over Afghanistan for bombing routes. And he'd have to report back to the captain every day and to determine how the progress was going with their plans. Mm-hmm. And my feeling is that they were using all the old armament to bomb a route for Unicol, which is an oil consortium that wanted to get the pipeline through Afghanistan. And that was, there's a boat taking off right behind me, but it's almost gone. But I think that they were using well, it's almost gone. I don't know if you can hear it in the background, but
I can hear you just fine. Keep talking.
Okay, well, I was thinking that they were using it to bomb a path for the pipeline to minimize the construction involved, and also to get into Afghanistan to lay claim to some of the natural resources and also the poppy plants. But to be doing the planning 3 weeks before 9/11 just shows you that there was more to this than what we've been told. And Unicol is the company, I believe, that got the rights to that pipeline.
It was a consortium of oil companies, of which Unocal was just one. Their representative before Congress saying we need to regime change Afghanistan so we can get the pipeline at the cost we are willing to pay versus what the Taliban was asking for. That was Hamid Karzai, who became, following the initial invasion, the installed president of Afghanistan. El Presidente de Unocal.
Okay, that's good to know. But again, going back to the bombing routes, what were they bombing? And it was a continuous bombing plan. And I feel again they're getting rid of old armament and bombing the route for the pipeline. And I'd like to see if that holds any water with that theory. But it was 3 weeks ahead of time.
Yes.
So there's some great information right from the source.
I mean, it's no secret that the war plan for Afghanistan was sitting on the president's desk when 9/11 happened. Of course, he was not at his desk. He was down in Florida at the Booker T Elementary School reading about pet goats. I don't know about the idea of bombing a pipeline right of way. certainly, given the terrain in Afghanistan, they might have just decided some of these geological features would be better to just bomb them and get them out of the way rather than try and get the bulldozers in there. But yeah, it was all about the oil. It was all about Afghanistan's mineral wealth, which is considerable. And of course, it was about the opium poppies, because the Taliban had a zero tolerance policy for opium. If you were caught with a plant, they'd take your hand off. And
well, the same year, Bush Jr. gave them almost $200 million supposedly to eradicate that, and didn't isn't Bosnia north of Afghanistan, Bosnia and Herzegovina?
Yes.
Didn't Clinton bomb the heck out of them? So these bombs certainly could make a nice path, and also you have to replace those bombs. So
yeah,
just another part of the New World Order plan of taking over everybody.
Yep. But no, as soon as the United States invaded Afghanistan, the poppies were blooming. Bumper crops and all. And over at my website, I have this article. It's up in that gray box near the top that says Opium in Afghanistan. And there are photographs in there of the opium poppies being guarded by coalition forces, including Americans, and bags of raw opium basically being loaded onto trucks by military people. And of course,
right.
This was pumped into the pharmaceutical industry, which is why we have this opioid crisis today. And of course, American drug lords were getting their piece of the action to put it out on the street.
No, just a wonderful scenario for peacekeepers and saving the country from itself.
Okay.
Yep, so you have a great day. God bless.
All right, thanks an awful lot, John. We're going to let you go here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. All right, getting on back to our domestic politics. I think we had a caller who called in yesterday about this, but there's this story over at Hideout Now saying that there's new evidence that suggests Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, and others were in on the Jussie Smollett hoax. And there's a lot of hate crime hoaxes out there. It's good for politics. It's good for the news. They just arrested this one guy, former NFL star, vandalized his own property because he wanted the insurance money. But again, we're being ruled and controlled with lies, fraud, and deception here. Harvey Weinstein is back in the news. And you kind of wish he'd sort of go away. But his trial starts sometime next year. And his attorney is already out there doing interviews with like CBS News, Gayle King, trying to build sympathy for this guy, saying his life has been ruined. Even if he wins the lawsuit, he never gets to be Harvey Weinstein ever again. Well, Harvey Weinstein was not a nice person, and a lot of people said that as well. Okay, article coming out of chimpplanet.blog, basically talking about the New York Times and the Kavanaugh smear, and how badly they blew it. And a Columbia Journalism Review poll released this year found that half of all Americans have hardly any confidence at all in the media. In fact, they have less confidence in the media than they have in Congress. And again, they had that article about this spy in Russia had to be pulled out because there were concerns about Trump, inadvertently saying classified information to the Russian ambassador. And it turned out the decision to remove this guy was actually made during the Obama administration because of leaks from senior Obama administration officials. But the New York Times said, well, let's bring it up to date here. And we'll just say that it was Trump. And fresh from that failure, they published that excerpt from this new book by Times reporter Robin Pograbin and Kate Kelly. And of course, they want to sell books. They want to move the books. So they had this previously unreported story about how Max Stier, we now know where this all came from. Max Stier, a male college classmate of Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, and he's the one who said he saw Kavanaugh expose himself to a girl at a Yale party, and friends pushed his penis into the hands of a female student. The problem is nobody there at who's there at the party can confirm that. It's another piece of manufactured news, and it's why people do not trust the corporate media. All right, let's talk about the economic news now. And as you know, we're in the middle of this nationwide strike by the United Auto Workers, and it's already having fallout effect. It's not just GM that's having to basically shut their factories down. It's all the companies that sell components and parts for cars and trucks to GM. And apparently next year is starting to lay off their workforce due to the disruption of the GM strike. So that is definitely a bad thing. Next year posted a statement on Facebook that said we'll continue to monitor the situation and work to minimize the impact on our employees. Our goal is to return to full production as quickly as possible. We'll also continue to update employees if the situation changes or as we learn more. So we're going to see this happening to the companies that manufacture tires, that manufacture the springs, that manufacture the electronics, because, you know, the GM assembly plants, that's the word, they assemble. They don't make all the parts internally. Some of the European car companies do, but even they bring in stuff from suppliers. We had a caller earlier in the show who said that the Federal Reserve is still shoving money at the banks, and apparently in the last 48 hours, they have injected $128 billion with a B in emergency liquidity to banks. 48 hours. So earlier reports were saying this had something to do with derivatives, but we don't really know. We don't know why the banks need all this emergency cash here. And it leads to another question, this one coming from governmentslaves.news. Why, if the economy is robust and everything is okay, does the Federal Reserve keep slamming the panic button? Now, Powell is out there insisting there'll be no negative interest rates in the next crisis. I wouldn't want to bet on that. Meanwhile, the Democrats are coming up with a new tax plan. And they started with the idea of property tax, where even though you bought and paid for your home, you still have to pay, if you will, rent to the government. They want to expand that. They want a federal tax that applies to almost every major asset you own. That includes the cash in your bank account, financial assets like stocks and bonds, private business and partnership interest, your entire real estate portfolio, collectible assets like art and fine wine. Never mind that you bought these assets with money that's already been taxed. Now they want to tax it again every single year. And then when you die, they tax it yet again. It's another sign that the government is hopelessly in debt. They're out of money. They can't balance the books. Let's take a phone call. Tom in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Tom, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Yeah, Michael. Dustin called in yesterday, and he said, being condescending, he said to me, or to our audience, that, John, you don't care about the people in the Middle East. Well, what is that supposed to mean? what? No, Dustin, I just don't want World War III. I care about everybody, but I don't want World War III, Dustin. You're making it sound like I want to, I should love all the people in the Middle East. No, I don't. It's none of our business to go into war with those people, Dustin. We don't need to have World War III. You're saying, oh, I don't. Well, you should care. I don't have to care about those people. I have to care about my own country and my citizenry in my country, Dustin. I'm not worried about what's going on in the Middle East. Maybe you are, but I'm not. I'm worried about what's happening in our borders. I'm worried about our government being taken over by Bolsheviks. That's what I worry about. The Middle East is not bothering me. The Afghanistans, the Pakistans, the Iranians, the Libyans, they don't bother me. The Arabs, let them all fight it out amongst themselves. Let the Jews use the Samson plan. You know what the Samson plan is, right, Michael?
Yeah.
Well, let them use that. If they feel like they're being threatened, let them use that. You know what that is, right?
Yeah, that's where they're going to, launch their supposedly secret nuclear arsenal in all directions.
Exactly. So you know what? It's funny. After 1945, they get a nuclear warhead within 12 years. Crazy. How did they, out of the state of Israel, become a nuclear power?
Well, they stole the weapons-grade uranium from here in the United States.
Every day we hear about the Nazis. The Nazis. The Nazis. What do you mean? The Nazis are wondering, but how do we get to the moon? How do we get to the moon, Michael? The Nazis. How do we get space exploration?
The German rocket scientists.
Exactly. How did Russia get what they got? The Nazis. The Russian scientists. They stole they got half the Nazis out in Russia. We hear about how bad the Germans were, the Nazis. Hey, Dustin, everybody listen to this. It was the German Americans who saved the Jews from annihilation. It was the majority of the soldiers in America who wanted to fight their own people. Well, they not understand. All you hear about, the Nazis, the Germans, the Germans are this. Hitler wasn't even a German. He was an Austrian.
Yes.
Yeah. So, this crap about Dustin, I do not want World War III. I do not look for World War III with the Iranians or the Russians. I don't. I don't want it.
I'm going to ask you to kind of calm down here a little bit. I don't want to get another fight going between you.
I don't want to fight, Michael. I'm not looking for no fight. I'm not looking for no fight.
All right,
I'm just trying to bring out
Tom,
the fact.
Tom, you got to take another commercial break. Stay on the line. I'm coming back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Tom in Florida. And Tom, before I give you the microphone back here, I get a lot of email about you. People think you're very smart and you've got some really good opinions, but you do need to kind of slow down so it's easier to understand what you are saying.
Okay, Michael, I'm sorry about that. Michael, first off, I did talk to John. I called John's show yesterday, and he had a really good show. And I did bring out the fact, and he brought something to my point to me that, the RBN, could have been real big, I guess, if they had more, I will donate $100 to your RBN this week. I promise you that. But okay, I will say this. I will definitely do that. You got my word. And what I also want to say is this, Michael, though, is, John was talking about RBN should have been like the OAN of cable news on the radio. And I hope that happens. I really, because, RBN does wake up, hopefully millions of minds what's going on in our country. And I hope that really happens. I pray that it does. As far as, like I had mentioned to him, I think these colleges should have, people should go to these colleges and mention to them about, these young kids, what's going on in the world, because they're evidently not getting the right news. They're getting fake news all over the place. That's why they vote the way they do, I guess. So these young minds, they're getting bombarded with fake news every day, and hopefully that we can change that. But getting back to Dustin, look, I don't have a beef with Dustin, but it seems like he likes to he gets condescending toward me at times for things that I say on the show. And like Michael yesterday, I want to hear your opinion. Do you want us to go to war with the Middle East? Should we be over there even mess with those people? Exactly. I don't think we should be worried about what's going on in Iran.
Stop. I mean, they're not benefiting the American people. In fact, it's ruining our economy. Our government is making the same mistake as the former Soviet Union. They're bankrupting the country, spending on weapons and war.
Absolutely. And that's what I was, and then Dustin's like trying to hit me where, Tom, you don't care about the people. Well, no, Dustin, I care about voting in my own country. You're the one that says you don't want to vote. I vote. I vote for my who I think should be president and my leaders and my governors and all that. I vote. I go out and vote. I voted for President Trump because I think the guy was better than the other of two lesser evils, which would have been Hillary, who has what? Uranium. They don't say nothing about her and the Russian uranium. This lady should be locked up, put in jail for just her BlackBerry alone. 33,000 emails she slammed. Can you imagine if Trump or a Republican did that, Dustin? What would they do to that person? You know, I don't have a beef with Dustin other than the fact he likes to try to hit me back saying, well, you know what, Dustin, I think Trump's trying to do something. I mean, I'm not saying the guy is Teddy Roosevelt. Maybe he should speak more softly and carry a big stick. That would be a nice gesture for Trump to do.
Yeah.
But, you know, right now, in our history and time, what we're going through with the inner cities in this country, like I told you the other day, if you took the 10 worst cities in the United States out of the equation, this would probably be like a country like Switzerland. A safe country, no problem, everything would be great. But no, it's the media's propping all this up. The media loves this, Michael. The Bolsheviks love this turmoil. You know, you got for 2.5 years, you hear, Dustin, you hear, and Mike, you have the media going after Trump as a Russian agent. The guy's colluding with the Russians, and he's going to blow. What is Trump going to do as a Russian agent? Going to blow up the whole United States? Going to send nuclear warheads off in his own cities? I mean, what is this narrative that these liberals are pushing? And you got Hollywood completely controlled by leftists. You know, if you're a Republican on Hollywood, you can't even get in a movie role.
Tom, got to let you go.
My mind, Mike.
Got to let you go. Got to take a break.
Look, I love everybody.
And we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. The reason you're hearing bleed through of a previous show is RBN is dealing with some technical issues on their main computer that normally runs the commercials and the breaks and the intros and the outros. And so poor Mike is having to try and do all of this by hand using a replay tape as the source, and you know that's what's going on. Anyway, welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we have callers on the line, starting with Dave in Michigan. Aloha, Dave. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Thank goodness I got a mute button on this new headset.
Hey, Mike, what the Fukushima's going on, man? How you doing? Welcome back to America.
Yes.
So yeah, we're in for a heck of a winter, from what they say and what I see. I'm up here a little north of you, and the leaves are falling, and the days are getting shorter awfully fast. But I'd like to comment on what Tom was saying. You know, it seems a lot of great people, you know, make the mistake of using words like our leaders. These people aren't our leaders. They're our representatives. We are our own leaders. We're self-governed, and we choose we vote for those that they that they've chosen to be our representatives. But, you know, since we've allowed our public servants to become our masters, that's why we're in this predicament we're in today. So, I've been in a battle with my electric company for 7 years about a smart meter, and they finally cut my power off yesterday to force me into submission. You know, what's Trump doing about that? You know, he's already signed a bill to allow 5G in you know, every corner of America. And, you know, I think he needs to do some research. And, you know, it seems more not that he's a Russian collusionist. He's a Israeli collusionist. It's really crazy.
That was certainly obvious all along. And he's a Wall Street collusionist. You know, like attracts like. He's a billionaire. And, a lot of his decisions are being driven by improving corporate life.
Right. And obviously we live in the most fascist time we've ever the world has ever experienced.
I agree.
These what do they call the valley down out there in California? Anyway, those guys rule the frickin' world. So People need to wake up and realize, and really, I mean, I know you got a lot of great callers. You know, I followed you over from the old network, which I'm friends with the owner, and he's a great guy, and, you know, I wish them well. You guys are doing great stuff over here, and, you know, keep up the good work. You know, I could stay on and keep talking, but I'm just preaching to the choir, so keep up the good work, and I hope you, you know, settle in nicely in Indiana, and we don't have too rough of a winter for you to get your feet wet. So, welcome home, brother.
I think this first winter will be rough because we're still acclimated to Hawaii. But I'm just going to bundle Claire up in all kinds of warm clothing, and you know, we'll keep the heat on in the house, and we're going to be fine here. So thank you for the phone calls, Dave, and we're going to switch over to Don in Arizona. Aloha, Don. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, Mike, you're talking about the F-35.
Yes.
There's a website called 321 Gold. The guy, Bob Moriarty, is the guy that runs it. And he wrote an article today where he touches on the F-35. He was a combat flyer in Vietnam. He flew 834 combat missions in Vietnam when he was just a kid, starting when he was 20 years old. So he knows what he's talking about. And he's a smart guy, too. He says, as a former fighter pilot, I can assure you with great confidence that the F-35 is the biggest piece of crap aircraft the U.S. ever built. And he goes on and says, it is worthless, can't fight, has no range, and it wouldn't last a week in combat against real pilots. He's a good writer also. I've read both of his books. And the other one, he says, the very first time an F-35 gets taken down by a kid with a $10 slingshot, you might as well shut down your flight program and fire all the pilots. So he knows what he's talking about, and everybody knows that. F-35 has never been tested yet in combat, has it? The first time it is tested, it's all over, because they spent $1.5 trillion on it, right?
Well, that's the ultimate bill for when it's completed. Israel is using the F-35, but they're using it primarily as a launch platform where nobody is shooting back at them.
Right. They're not, the aircraft is apparently no good. And so, you know, but he talks about the procurement program is totally corrupt and is little more than a retirement program for a bunch of useless ex-military deadbeats.
Yes.
They'd be on welfare and living under a bridge if it weren't for the F-35 aircraft. That's what it's all about. They're just grabbing money.
It's about the money. And I've mentioned frequently there's this very funny movie directed by Richard Benjamin called The Pentagon Wars, and it's based on a book of the same name, which is based on the true story of the development of the Bradley infantry fighting vehicles. And for those people who are involved in this thing, it's about getting it out there, getting the money for it, getting promoted for it, and you know, our kids get stuck with some of this stuff out there in the field. I still remember the big stink over the original M16 versus the M14, and how military with vested financial interests in the M14 were literally sabotaging the M16s in Vietnam, and they were getting kids killed.
That's the Army way. You're fighting. There's no war going on, so you're fighting somebody else in the Army to fight each other. It's all a bunch of bull, and it's got to come to an end, like you said here. As soon as somebody shoots down the F-35 with a $10 slingshot, then that'll get everybody's attention. Okay, I'll let you go, Mike. Thanks.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Mike in Brazil. Aloha, Mike. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. How are you doing? Are you all right?
Yeah.
I was going to talk about the 2024 elections. Since Trump can't run anymore, I was thinking about Ted Cruz. What do you think about that?
I'm sorry. Would you run that one by me again?
I was thinking about the 2024 elections, and since Trump can't run anymore, I was thinking about Ted Cruz. I think he's
Ted Cruz. Okay,
good.
that was the part I didn't understand.
Ted Cruz, Senator Ted Cruz. Yeah, because he's great for the Second Amendment and all that, and freedom of speech, and I have him on my Twitter account, and all his tweets are excellent. I love what he's tweeting out. And I was thinking, because Donald Trump, regardless whether he wins or not in 2020, will be in for a very nasty surprise, because imagine if one of these lunatics that you see on television, if they ever get into the White House, in the Oval Office, and being sworn in as president, regardless of vote fraud or honest elections, it doesn't matter. But assume for a second that one of these lunatics enter the White House and they become the president. Life in the United States is going to be profoundly and irreversibly transformed. And I was thinking all day yesterday and this morning I was having my coffee, and I was thinking, I said, Jesus, what's going to happen if one of these lunatics like Pocahontas or Beto O'Rourke, or any one of them, Beto O'Rourke, who said that, yes, you're right, we're going to come and get your guns. I actually have a cartoon of him.
Yes.
I'm going to post it on Twitter anyway. So imagine one of these lunatics is going to get into the White House. The U.S. is going to be screwed, royally so.
Yes.
And I'm trying to form a base to try to elect Senator Cruz, because so far I haven't seen anybody better than him.
Well,
And
there's a problem with that. Okay, Ted Cruz is not a natural-born U.S. citizen, which is a requirement in the Constitution.
I didn't know that.
That's when they ran him back in 2016, and everybody was scratching their head and saying, what the heck is going on here? They're running a guy who constitutionally is ineligible for the White House.
In what country was he born?
Canada.
Oh, he's Canadian. Oh, geez, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you something, I'd vote for him in a heartbeat if I were to be facing Hillary or Ted Cruz. Because basically we're down to these two options. It's either Hillary or somebody like her, or Ted Cruz. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't give a damn if Ted Cruz is born in Canada, as long as he believes in American values, and as long as he's assimilated and believes in the Constitution, the rule of law, and he observes the Constitution and the provisions, the constitutional law. So for me, this is, I understand it's a constitutional issue here, but for me personally, from my point of view, this doesn't really matter as long as the guy is good for the country. What would you rather have, an American-born Marxist or an American like Ted Cruz, who was born in Canada, but believes in every provision of the Constitution, including the Bill of Rights? So I'm like, I don't know what to believe. First of all, this is a shock to me. I didn't even know that Ted Cruz was a Canadian. But anyway, let me get to my last point, my second and last one. I understand there are some people out there who are willing to buy gold, okay? And
yes.
I'm one of them myself, okay? And I have quite a bit of quantity of gold. Well, it's not like in ingots of gold of 24 karat, but it's gold that I mined from the Amazon River. And believe me, there's lots of gold here. And in Guyana is a paradise for gold diggers. If anybody out there in the United States is a gold digger, wants to get gold, and I've heard, well, I don't know, I've never been to Guyana, but I've talked to people who have been there, and they dug gold, and they struck it rich. These people are millionaires today. And they say that the gold in Guyana is 10 times more superior to the gold that you find here in the Amazon, in the Brazilian side of the Amazon, that is. So anybody out there who's thinking about mining gold, I suggest they better save some money for an airline ticket, a round-trip ticket with a stay of 6 months, and the rental equipment. The dig gold is very cheap. It's not expensive. And the fuel is another thing, because you need fuel, to run the machinery. But
yes.
Other than that, yes, sir.
No, I was agreeing with you.
Yes. Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying, because I know there are a lot of people out there, they love gold, and rightly so, because nobody believes in ink and paper anymore. It let us down many times.
Yes.
And look at the prices in the supermarket today. What you buy for $2 tomorrow is going to be $2.50, maybe $3, and the prices keep rising up. But in gold, it goes up in price. I don't know if it's rigged, if the price of gold is rigged, but I believe it is. But here in the Amazon in South America, Mike, I tell you something, it's a gold digger's paradise. I'm telling you, a lot of people, I met Germans, Dutch, Danish, people, even Swedes. I met Swedes here. They had like $120,000 for the rental equipment and all that stuff just to dig gold. And the rivers are very shallow. I'm not really deep, exception being the Amazon. The Amazon is very deep. But they're like tributaries of the Amazon, and there's plenty of gold. All you have to do, just just go there, get ready to work. And
okay,
there
Mike, I got a question.
Yes, sir.
Are we talking about these tributaries on the Amazon? Are they like part of anybody's private property? Do you have to get permission before you start digging things up?
Oh, no. What I mean by a tributary of the Amazon, I don't mean in the sense of private property or anything like that. What I mean is like the affluent of the Amazon River. It's like the Amazon River is fed by like seven rivers.
Yes.
And they all converge to a point close to the city of Manaus. And that you have the Rio Negro, which is actually black water, but it's clear. It's a very clean water, but it looks black, as opposed to the Amazon River, which is murkish, it's like brown with a lot of sediments and all that stuff. So when I say a tributary of the Amazon, I mean about one of the affluents of the Amazon. So I myself, I live not on the side of the Amazon River, but one of its tributaries, which in this case is Rio Madeira, which means the river of wood, because there's a lot of wood floating in the river. And
all right.
Got that name from,
Mike, right, we're going to have to bring.
Anybody thinking about gold?
We're going to have to bring this to an end. I've let you go on about gold, which everybody's fascinated with. And by the way, when Claire and I lived in Southern California, we would go up into the San Gabriel Mountains and pan for gold, and some of the gold that we got is actually in her wedding ring, because I'm a cheap bastard.
Yeah, well, the gold here is good quality, Mike. All you have to do, you have to send it to a smelter, and they purify it, and you get bullion gold. And believe me, I probably think it's about 6 ounces of gold here in powder form. It's like in shavings, but it's pure gold. All I have to do is just, melt it and turn it into an ingot or something like that. But anyway, Mike, that's enough of my rant, okay? Let somebody else take on the air, okay? Take it easy.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And if I was younger, I might try and do that, because everybody likes gold. Russia and China are buying gold like crazy. And like I said, we didn't find that much in Southern California, but we did have it properly smelted before it was put into Claire's wedding ring. Anyway, getting on back to the economic news, Europe's banks may be at risk of failing if negative rates continue. This is coming from the EIU. Now, earlier, as I reported, Powell is saying the Federal Reserve will not go to negative rates in the next crisis no matter what. They can't fix the system. They really can't here. All right, on the subject of immigration, Trump toured a new section of the supposedly impenetrable, eventual 500-mile border wall, and would love to see it get built. But again, back in the 1990s, Congress passed a bill to fund a 700-mile border wall, of which only 35 miles was actually built. We don't know why that happened. All right, as long-term listeners know, I'm originally a New Englander, born in Boston, spent my childhood in New Hampshire. And so I'm very familiar with the state of Maine, especially Portland. And apparently they're now having some difficulties with refugees. And apparently what used to be a very pleasant, peaceful city is now ridden with crime. And it's is being described as a hellhole. So anyway, California Governor Newsom asked Trump to help with the homelessness crisis. Trump is on his case saying that to fix it. Governor Newsom is asking for funding of 50,000 housing vouchers. And here is the problem. California has spent $23 billion on the illegal immigrants, and they neglected their own citizens to do it. And so now he's saying, yeah, well, you got to give me some money. I'll deal with the homelessness if you give me some money. So we're coming up here on another commercial break. When we come on back, new development on this Kevin Spacey story. And normally I wouldn't carry it, but something funny is going on with this one. Apparently, Kevin Spacey was being sued, and the gentleman who filed the lawsuit has passed away. And here's where it gets weird. They're keeping him anonymous. They won't release his name, and they will not release the cause of death. Okay, we got to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, you're probably aware that Edward Snowden recently published a book titled Permanent Record. And the U.S. government is now suing the publisher of the book for not giving the CIA and the NSA a chance to erase classified details from the book. So, in times past, courts would have said, well, tough. Edward Snowden is a whistleblower, and he's blowing the whistle, and there is no pre-publication censorship. Laws in this country, except one area, cryptography. Not allowed to publish anything about codes and encryption, or to sell anything about codes or encryption without clearance from the NSA and the CIA, which is why I gave away all the source code in my challenge to the NSA. Anyway, Snowden's book is a bestseller. Everybody wants to read it, and I'm certainly going to try and get a copy of it and find out just what our government's been up to. Okay. We have a caller on the line who's apparently donating some random access memory, and he wanted to come on the air to talk about installation.
Yes, if I could, please, I'd like to give you a couple of hints and tips on how to install it. Is that okay?
Yeah, real quick.
Okay. First off, an issue is with your password. When you first brought up your computer, when you brought it to life, it's possible that you used one password and then you changed it. Now, if you have changed the password and you forgot the first password, you're toast, because when you install RAM, your computer senses a very serious change and it wants the first password that you ever used, okay? That's fact number one. Now, the second, so in other words, write down all your passwords that you can remember for sign-on, and you'll just have to see what happens when you install the RAM.
Well,
now,
okay.
Okay, now let me go a little further with this. The second issue is all you have to do is go to YouTube and put in install RAM and put your computer manufacturer and your model number. You will probably find a good YouTube video. But
yes.
let me give you a couple of pointers. What you do is you just open your box. You power it down. You open your box.
Yes.
Take the power cord out. When you look inside, you're going to find a board with like 4 slots in it. Now, you should have one. I imagine you have one piece of RAM. You have one memory board because you have talked about having 4 gigs of RAM. So probably what you have is 3 open slots and one board of RAM. Now, what you have to do is push the clips on both sides of the RAM. You push them away and you pull out the RAM. But the secret is that the memory boards are handed. They have a right-hand side and a left-hand side.
Yes.
So you have to look on the board.
Well, there's a guide slot. There's a guide slot, for when you reinsert the RAM.
Exactly. Okay, so in other words, you pretty much have the idea. So in other words, what I sent you, now this is not a personal present. What happened is I bought a new desktop about 2 months ago. It came with 32 gigabytes of RAM, and I thought, just for the heck of it, let's go to 64. So then I'm sitting on 32 gigabytes of RAM. I don't know what to do with it. And you mentioned a couple of times in passing, you said that your desktop is on 4 gigs, which is not acceptable at all. That's just not safe. So you're getting the RAM. It should come Saturday to your post office box in Indiana, and there's no strings attached. Just use it and be happy. That's all.
Well, thank you very much. And after we move into our new place in October, I'll probably use it. And I have put computers together, and I know how to do the RAM installation, so there's not going to be an issue here. But I definitely do appreciate the gift, and hope that it's all compatible with the memory that's already in the machine.
Well, you're going to have to you're going to not, you can't keep the 4 gigs in there. You have to put, I sent you 4 boards. So you get rid of your 4 gigabyte board and you install the 8 gigabyte boards. There's 4 of them. So you can't leave the old piece in there. That's got to come out.
Yeah, no, I understand that here. I have an Asus motherboard, just so you know. And in fact, my main desktop machine is actually a white box that I put together with a friend, and it's actually quite nice. And so I thank you for the gift of the RAM. And I will definitely, like I said, after we move into our new digs in October, and I'm able to get the my studio set up again, I will definitely avail myself of your generosity.
Okay, sir. Now, don't send it back if it doesn't fit. Give it to somebody else, because I tried. When I first swapped it out, I looked around where I live, and nobody needed any RAM. So don't send it back to me if you can't use it. Give it to a worthy person, somewhere in the state of Indiana. I'm sure you can find somebody.
I'm sure I can absolutely find somebody who's going to be worthy. Anyway, listen, Alan, got to let you go here. We're coming up on another commercial break, and the music should be starting very, very soon. There it is. Okay, another commercial break. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're about halfway through. Getting on back to the news here. Over at Instagram, I mean, this censorship by the so-called social media is really spiraling out of control. Now they are banning photos of people at gun ranges, claiming they promote violence. Actually, what they're promoting is training and proficiency. That's the latest thing. A picture of you down at the gun range, das ist verboten. Have to get book burning has gone digital, is what's going on here. All right, this, I think, represents a failure of our educational system, because according to a recent survey, 75% of American adults believe the U.S. Constitution guarantees the right of an average citizen to own a gun. 15% disagree. That 15% represents people who are clueless, who have been brainwashed by the educational system to not understand that owning a weapon is a right. And of course, you bear responsibility for what you do with it. But I think we commented before, in the Common Core educational curriculum, they rewrote the Second Amendment to say that you had a right to keep and bear guns as part of a state militia. That was their thinking. All righty. So there's this Democratic senator who is joining in the fray against Beto O'Rourke, who made a real fool of himself the other day saying, heck yes, we're going to take your guns away. And Democratic Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia criticized the extreme gun confiscation stance taken by Beto O'Rourke, saying the former congressman won't be taking any of his guns away. I like that attitude. I really do like that attitude. You know, and they're still obsessing over AK-47s and AR-15s. They call them weapons of war, not in semi-automatic form. They're plinking guns. They're home defense weapons. And gun enthusiasts call them sporting rifles because they've got these little Picatinny rails on there where you can accessorize and put on a flashlight or a laser sight or something else to help you do whatever it is you're trying to do. And the reality is that except for these occasionally staged mass shootings, the vast majority of gun crime is committed with handguns. And I don't see any Democrats out there saying, well, we got to take away the handguns. You look at all the killings up there in Chicago. Nobody's using an AK-47 or an AR-15 to do that. What they're concerned about, though, is that as things get ugly, as the economy tightens up, they're afraid that the American people, if they are armed with AR-15s and AK-47s, will be in a position to basically fire them all. Get out of our capital city, you're done, you're done, you're done. Okay, Paul McHugh, he's a professor and psychiatrist at Johns Hopkins University, has condemned the act of allowing children to transition from one gender to another. He's saying it's comparable to doing a frontal lobotomy. This is bad for the child. Over at MIT, there was this computer scientist, Richard Stallman, and he made headlines a while back basically saying that, you know, pedophilia, it's just another sexual orientation, and we shouldn't be making a big deal about it. And, of course, it drew a huge backlash, along with his comment that the victims of Jeffrey Epstein's sex crimes were willing. They consented to this sex trafficking scheme. There's at least one of the women who's come forward who said she went to what she thought was a legitimate job interview and she got kidnapped there. Doesn't sound like she made consent there. Anyway, so Richard Stallman has changed his mind, and he doesn't think pedophilia is okay anymore. And it isn't. I'm sorry, it isn't. You should allow children to be children for as long as they possibly can. Because once you cross that line, once you're forced into being an adult and thinking in adult ways about life, you can't go back. So this is more than just about the sex. It's about taking a child's innocence. Okay, we're going to go back to the phones here. Chance in West Virginia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. I'm glad you mentioned Manchin's comment. And
yes.
That's one of the reasons why we have a rather low crime rate in this state. I just wanted to let you know.
Okay.
Yep, I appreciated that comment. That's why we have a low crime rate. Okay, Mike, thank you. Now, have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And getting on back to the news here. Apparently, Scotiabank is being scolded for what is being described as Muppet-grade security. You remember Jim Henson's The Muppets, TV show. Apparently, internal source code and credentials were just leaked online, as well as some of its private login keys to back-end systems. So apparently over the past 24 hours, the Canadian financial giant has torn down GitHub repositories inadvertently left open to the public that contain this sensitive information. And these repositories featured, among other things, software blueprints and access keys for a foreign exchange rate system, mobile application code, and login credentials for services and database instances. A gold mine of vulnerabilities to criminals, for criminals and hackers to exploit. Yeah, I mean, that is a real problem. I think that people who are forced to entrust their private information to these computerized systems in the companies should have a right to sue if that company loses track of it. At least, you know, sue for the costs of being able to change their identity, change their passwords. And, they're having terrible weather down in Texas. Tropical storm Imelda. Anyway, getting on back here to the computer stuff. Apparently, Microsoft has done it again. There is currently a major bug in Windows Defender, the free antivirus software that ships with Windows 10. And running a quick or full scan will fail after a few seconds and only go through a handful of files, like 6 or 7, resulting in superficial and incomplete results. Such scans are usually known to take tens of minutes, even hours for a full scan. You start it and you let it go overnight. Come back to it in the morning here. So apparently the issue is being widely reported over the past 2 days on the Microsoft tech support forums, Reddit, and tech support sites like Ask Woody, Deskmodder, Born City, and Bleeping Computer. The bug impacts Windows Defender version 4.18.1908.7 and later released earlier this week. The bug was introduced while Microsoft tried to fix another bug introduced with the patch last July. I think what's going on is we've allowed our technology to become too complex. We can't manage it anymore. And that was a big part of what led to the downfall of Rome. When Rome was young and energetic and well-funded, they did amazing engineering. They invented concrete. And then as the economy began to fail, they couldn't maintain their infrastructure. The aqueducts started to crumble. The roads started to crumble. I mean, there's still plenty of them there. But that can lead to the fall of a civilization. If we can't manage this technology, maybe it's just a business decision by Microsoft, to just not spend the money on good programmers. Maybe they've let all the legacy software engineers that built Microsoft go in favor of lower paid foreign students. Something has definitely gone wrong with Microsoft. And that is a problem here, I think. Now, this next article ought to scare the heck out of you, and it does me as well, because it shows the rise of corporate rule in this country. Facebook is going to bankroll an independent Supreme Court, that's how they described it, their word, to moderate your content and set censorship precedents. Well, I don't want my content monitored, and I'm opposed to censorship on the grounds of the First Amendment. Okay, apparently Mike in Brazil called back in, and Mike, I understand you have an additional comment.
Yes, Mike, you just mentioned about something about weapons of war, and may I remind people, everybody, including Beto O'Rourke, that bows and arrows used to be weapons of war. Spears used to be weapons of war. Rocks used to be weapons of war. Where are these guys? Where are these guys getting to, you know? I mean, they're talking about weapons of war, Bows and arrows are still being used today. I live in the Amazon. I see the Indians with bows and arrows, and believe me, they're very efficient with it. Okay.
No, I
even
had an archery set up in Hawaii, but I had to leave it behind.
Brother, before you even touch the trigger. Okay. So I tell you, I mean, this is ridiculous. Weapons of war? What does it mean? Weapons of war? Any weapon is a weapon of war. Up to 300 years ago, 400 years ago, we used to have bows and arrows. Those were considered strategic weapons of war because you could shoot somebody at a distance. Okay, anybody who doesn't believe me, just look it up in the dictionary. So this, I mean, this really got me worked up, Mike, when I heard this weapons of war. And out of all the people on Earth, Beto O'Rourke is supposed to have said this. And Beto doesn't want his guns taken away. He wants to take your guns away, okay?
Yes.
So I'm sorry, Mike, I had to call the second time because this really, really, really pissed me off. Okay, have a good show now, okay?
All right, thanks an awful lot. And by the way, Colt has announced they're going to stop manufacturing the AR-15. Now, of course, there's still the 80% kits out there, and it does take a lot of work to get them into a working weapon. But I imagine there's probably going to be a lot of people rushing in to fill the gap because Colt did not have an exclusive patent on the design that originally came from Armalite. And Colt acquired the rights to manufacture, but if they're not going to manufacture anymore, who knows what's going to happen? Somebody's going to fill that market need. All righty, we're going to go back to the phones. Dave in Illinois, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing? I'd like to make a couple of comments. You were talking about the transgender and the doctor's comments, and
yes,
another one after that about some of these guns. But when I was in college hitting the psychology back all the way up until the beginning of the 90s till the mid-90s, and all of the psychology professors in all my courses, when we hit into the whole child development, the whole opinion of psychologists up until that point was if you had a child that was born with both genders, they would try to encourage the parents and your general practice doctors to wait until puberty until they decided what gender to
well, you're talking about you're talking about the hermaphrodites.
Right, correct.
Okay.
And they
it's a very small
section
of the population.
Right. They knew that was a problem to do it too soon because they did it in the past too soon, and the child would often turn out to be the other gender. So they would encourage the parents to wait until the child decided. So how is the child when it's not even developed? They know this, and it's shocking to me to see some professors come out and say, or doctors, to say, "Oh, it's okay to do it this soon," because they're not even thinking about that at that point.
No, they're not. They're way too young. They're way too young.
So it just, and they made us go down, and even it, it's just disturbing to see professors and doctors coming out and saying, "Oh, it's okay to do this," and they know at such a young age. It's just amazing we're having this discussion and to see it on the news.
Well, going back to my comment about letting children stay children for as long as they can, I consider all these teachers and doctors and activists who are trying to convince children to be gender fluid, I consider that bordering on child abuse.
Well, it's like they're trying to play God.
Very much so.
It's just disturbing. I just cannot believe all the teaching they did to us and the research, and to come out with this nonsense.
Yeah.
It's just shocking. Now, one other comment. You brought up about the guns in Chicago and all these gun laws.
Yeah.
Now, ever since I was a kid, when I was riding with the cops up there and all the FBI guys, they had guns. Even though the handgun laws were illegal in Chicago, they had guns everywhere. And here's the thing that I was surprised back then is all you had to do was get elected into a public office. Now, the normal people, average citizens, couldn't have a handgun or certain weapons. But if you got elected into an office, they gave you a badge and a gun. And I was like, wait a minute. You just have to they don't, no training. Okay, you're elected as an alderman. Here you go. Here's your badge and your gun. But nobody else could have them. But I'm going to tell you, all you had to do was sit up in one of them cars or unmarked vehicle on New Year's Eve. They've had machine guns and automatic weapons everywhere. That place lit up. But I asked those guys, because I was forced to talk to them until 2 years ago. You ever have a problem with a legal gun owner? And they all said no. You know, it was always illegal.
All right. Well, Dave, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials, and we've got another caller waiting on the line. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones here to Robert in California. Aloha, Robert. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Mike, I wanted to talk about Riyadh over there in Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just reading an article, and I was trying to bring it up here on the computer. I can't remember where I found it, but I guess they just ordered 20 million barrels of oil from Iraq.
Now, that is interesting.
Did you hear about that? Yeah,
no,
that is interesting. Now, okay, well, I'm glad to have informed you about it. Yeah, it looks like they just ordered 20 million barrels of oil from Iraq. That's kind of twofold. I was also looking at another piece of news where it said Iraq wasn't willing to be part of the Maritimes coalition over there, with the U.S. Yeah. They're not going to have us be staging our troops over in their country. So I was wondering, well, actually, I don't have to wonder. I'm pretty sure those two are connected somehow. But I was kind of wondering what it all means. I know this is fresh news on you. I hate to just hit you on the fly here, but what's your opinion about this? What do you think might be going on with this?
Well,
you seem to be a pretty intellectual guy.
Saudi Arabia may be doing this to cover the supposed shortfall from the drone strikes on the refinery, or there may indeed be a quid pro quo coming in from Riyadh saying, we're going to buy all this oil from you, you're going to get all this money for it, but we need you to come on board with this maritime coalition. And it's not like it's going to cost Iraq a lot to do, because they're right there in the area, and they do have some warships. And all this coalition stuff is about is simply escorting tankers in and out of the Gulf and making sure that nobody messes with them.
Okay. Yeah, no, that sounds pretty smart. Well, let me ask you one other question. Actually, you kind of brought it up by your comment. What do you mean by the supposed oil shortage? What do you have to say about that? I'm kind of trying to figure that out. I was pretty sure that they were actually kind of shorted there, but if there's any doubt to that, I'd sure like to know where to look it up.
Well, there is doubt to it, because a lot of experts were looking at the refinery after the drone and missile attack and saying it just doesn't look that badly damaged. And, Saudi Arabia just came out with this number: 50% of our output is offline for the foreseeable future. And this shot oil prices up all over the world here. But we don't know how bad the damage really is. And there are more and more indications that all of this was staged and allowed to happen to give the U.S. government a pretext for attacking Iran.
Yeah, no, you're right. I smell a rat somewhere.
Yeah. Part that I cannot understand is, if the Houthis did not actually carry out this attack, why did they initially try and take credit for it, knowing it would probably spur Saudi Arabia to some kind of a military response? So this is all very, very confused. Now, again, there was this military commander in Yemen who came out the other day and said that they had help from inside Saudi Arabia itself. Anyway, Robert, got to let you go. Got to do a break for station identification. Back with another phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to go back to the phones to Dustin in New Jersey. And Dustin, let's not say anything to provoke Tom to more hysterics. So what's on your mind?
I'm going to respond to him. This has to do with, Tom, you says, well, you care about more what happens here with the border and this or that. Well, what about Libya? Libyans are flooding into Europe because of our leaders and the leaders of Europe and NATO causing the bombing in Libya. So, and what about Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan or the Mujahideen? Why are we linked to Saudi Arabia? That's your leaders, your government that's doing this. It's not me. You know, that's your so-called leaders. You know, I mean, you got to take responsibility because that's your leaders. Even though, you know, I didn't vote for Bush or, you know, I voted for Obama, and I obviously take responsibility because he lied. But, you know, I learned my lesson with Trump, though, because, like I said, was it Mike from Brazil? He mentioned Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is not a real constitutionalist because remember when he was on the stage with Trump during the presidential debates? Didn't he say he wanted to bomb the Syrians and the Russians? That's not in the Constitution. So Ted Cruz is a fraud. You know, I wouldn't vote for him, or I wouldn't. I had it with. I mean, I don't know. Tulsi Gabbard's the same way. She's a fraud too, because what's with the BDS and all this other stuff. So it's just like I said yesterday. It's the system. You know, the system is. It is.
It's a terrible. It's controlled by the bankers, controlled by the military-industrial complex. We're being controlled by corporate interests, and our politicians are just sales representatives to try and sell us whatever product they're selling next week. Which is why we're seeing all this push for mandatory vaccinations. Doesn't have anything to do with health. Has to do with stock price. Has to do with pushing the product. And, you know, I mean, that's life under fascism. And, but in one area, I'm in agreement with Tom. We shouldn't be in these wars all over the rest of the world. As you yourself said, these wars have resulted in the displacement of a lot of people into Europe and here into the United States of America. You know, we wouldn't be having this refugee and illegal immigrant crisis if they'd simply left well enough alone. And the concern I have is we're already overextended with wars, 7 that we're aware of, and who knows how many classified incursions that are going on around the world. I think Ron Paul said it was something like 70. You know, we've got almost 800 bases around the world. That's costing a fortune as well. And this nation is being bankrupted by all this war machinery and war spending, and it has to come to a stop.
That's what I was trying to kind of get to. Like, we shouldn't be in any of these countries, but like I said yesterday, we created this mess. Look at what we did in Ukraine.
Okay, Dustin, stop saying we, because I know for a fact you had nothing to do.
Our government, not we. But, but those are our representatives, Mike, supposedly, you know.
Well,
they're our representatives, though. Like, you know,
they represent whatever they represent whatever the lobbyists want to have represented.
Well, it's the same with Trump, though. He's our leader, but yet why are these weapons through the CIA still being funneled out of like Bulgaria or whatever, you know, into these shell companies? You know, why is that allowed to still happen? That's what I'm trying to get to.
Well, it's a question of who's actually running the show here. And at this point, Trump has proven to be a very ineffective leader. I see him as weak and indecisive and too easily manipulated. You know, is the CIA in control? Because they've never been shy about throwing their weight around, even going all the way back to Harry Truman. They're supposed to just be about fact gathering, but they've gone on out, covert activities. In fact, one of the reasons it's thought that John F. Kennedy was assassinated was that he was very angry with the CIA over the botch-up over the Bay of Pigs, and he wanted to transfer covert military action back under the control of the Pentagon, which would have been a huge loss of prestige, not to mention money, for the Central Intelligence Agency. That's, you know, again, the laundry list of reasons JFK was killed.
Which the CIA would be then then nothing's going to be fixed because the CIA is probably for open borders, right? Because that allows things to come into the country.
I'm not privy to what the CIA is thinking. Certainly, I have no doubt they're looking for recruits or assets within that flood of people that can be turned into informants or assets and sent back to their home country.
And Mike, real quick on the previous caller, that was Saudi Aramco is purchasing oil, natural gas, and other items. I saw that article for their portfolio, to expand their portfolio, per se.
Okay.
That's all I got to say, Mike. Yep.
All right.
Have a good show.
Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go and switch over to Jim in New York. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Jim, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hi, Mike.
Ah, there you are. Okay, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Dustin, it doesn't matter who's elected. And Trump's really made that clear since he's been elected. Look what's happening. We're getting everything we feared under Hillary.
Yes.
The internet is being censored like you can't imagine. I used to love YouTube. It's terrible. Just for 3 years ago, they are banning things left and right.
Yes.
It doesn't matter who the president. I'm convinced it doesn't matter. And Trump's really proven that out. I remember talking to my dad almost 30 years ago.
Yeah.
At the time, I was a Republican. I mentioned, I said something like, well, JFK started to ruin this country. But my dad made the remark, he said, JFK doesn't run the culture. He doesn't run Hollywood. He doesn't run the banking and everything. And, he's right. No matter who the president is, the culture keeps getting worse and worse.
Yes.
And, if you destroy the culture, you can destroy the country. And
maybe that's what's behind all this transgender nonsense.
Well, it's another point. You notice that I don't even think under Obama they had drag queen story hour, but that's happening under Trump.
Yep.
And it seems I don't know, our controllers, if you will, they set the culture. They send these directives out. We're going to have drag queen story hour.
Yeah.
People go, oh, well, what can you do? And frankly, what can you do? If you were to go protest, you may be the one going to prison.
These drag queen story hours are being protected by the local police.
Yes, and the local police are on the side of
agenda.
Yes, and you'll be the one that goes to prison. And that's another observation I have. I think Antifa is loaded with federal operatives. I think Antifa is the thug army of the deep state, if you will. And the purpose is to get middle American conservatives to be afraid to protest. And frankly, it's worked like a charm. I mean, who would go out and get in a fight with Antifa when you have people like Jacob Goodman, who's in jail for 20 years for a fist fight? He was branded a hate criminal and federal charges for a simple fist fight.
Yep.
And so I think Antifa's working like a charm, and people are afraid. And frankly, I can't blame them. I mean, why go out? I'm going to get in an altercation with a Antifa type person, and I get hate crime charges and thrown in prison for 20 years. What good does that do? Right?
Yeah. Well, Antifa is definitely a modern, in my opinion, they're a modern incarnation of the Nazi brown shirts. And they ought to read their history book and find out what happened to those guys.
Well, it's been quite effective because, frankly, people are afraid, and I can't blame them.
Yep.
Now, another thought I had, and I see I read the comment sections, and people say, oh, we're headed towards a police state in the future. Like
we're
it's
already
an abstraction. There. We're already there. The future is now. We've been in a police state since at least 9/11. People have been sent to Gitmo and prison, but it's on a small scale where if it doesn't affect 99.99% of the people, they go, well, I'm just glad it wasn't me.
Yeah.
So we're in a police state. Another abstraction, people say, when they come for the guns, that's happening now.
Yeah.
If you're unfortunate to live in Maryland or a blue state like that poor man who was killed by the police had when they came for his guns. And so it's happening now. It's not when they come for the guns. It's when they get to you.
Yes.
And just like in Maryland, in Florida, there's been thousands of cases. Katrina, they took everyone's guns. So they say when they take for the guns, it's already happened. But it's on a very, very small scale.
Well, they're hoping to do it slowly so people don't notice. If they were to start kicking down the doors of entire neighborhoods to confiscate the guns, word would spread like a wildfire, and there would be a reaction.
Well, that's true, but the reaction I see, like the poor man in Maryland, no one came out and protested about this man being killed. What did they do? They were like, well, thank God it wasn't me. So it seems like we're headed towards that Solzhenitsyn quote about, what would have happened if people resisted to think.
Yes.
One more thing, real quick, about the culture. I'll leave you with a quote from Joseph Stalin. He says, America is like a healthy body, and its resistance is threefold. It's patriotism, its morality, and its spiritual life. If we can undermine these three areas, America will collapse from within.
Yep.
So I thought that was a very powerful quote. It seems the communists, if you will, they're winning. They're winning.
Yeah.
And they're using the frog in the pot. And the frog in the pot, it seems to work like a charm. And I see no change.
Well, like I said, what I'm foreseeing is a Soviet Union-style collapse for this government, triggered either by an economic collapse, because there's going to come a point where, just pouring billions into the bank like the Fed has been doing over the last 48 hours, it's simply not going to work any longer. I mean, the stock market was down again today.
Yeah. Well, or a war. And a war, someone made a quote who said, wow, we can do more in 5 years of war than 30 years of peace.
Yes.
God forbid there's a war, because all these things, heavy police state, heavy gun control, people during a bad war, people won't even notice. If they don't go along, what are you, unpatriotic?
Yeah.
So if there's a war, they could pass major gun control and people wouldn't even notice. You wouldn't even hear about it. So let's pray there's no war with Iran.
We're already in
that
at war. It's a slow motion world war.
Yes.
Country after country
Yes,
after country after country. Now they're getting ready to go into Iran. And they're not going to stop until they get into a nuclear conflict with Russia and or China.
Yes. Well, thank you for taking my call, Mike, and have a great show.
All right, thanks an awful lot, Jim. We're going to switch over to Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I think that Dustin and Jim and you are absolutely right. And when it's the system, starting with the system is absolutely, it's there to serve, the government is there to serve the interests of the owners.
Yes.
They executes the will of the owners. I will also point out that as Jim was talking about with Antifa, that again, Antifa was primarily financed, at least the conduit was through George Soros. But George Soros has been behind the same conduit, all these NGOs that have been doing the color revolution for the CIA all over the world. So that the intelligence and the secret police, deep call it what you will, it's no accident that they were the ones behind the coup against Trump. And it's no accident that they're also behind Antifa too, just as Jim and you were talking about. This is all. I know you've remarked before about the CIA's presence in Hollywood and how that's linked, and the FBI and so on and so forth. This is a police state. It has been for a long time. And I can remember several years back when my daughter, who at the time was a freshman in high school, this was Trump had just become president, and she was doing a paper on the state, what was Obama was president, and the state of civil rights in America. And she asked me about it, and she said, well, you know, there's gay rights. And of course, Jim's right also about that as well. That's set by the mass media, right? There's gay rights. There's that they can get married, and she goes, isn't that in advance? And I go, well, yeah, I guess they have a right to their own civil rights as well, as far as they don't infringe on anybody else's. But I said to her, if you look at it this way, if let's say there's a gay marriage in Denver, and under what the government can do now, they can get married, okay, but the government can drone strike that. They have every right to drone strike that wedding. And they proclaim the right to kill American citizens. They proclaim the right for indefinite detention without trial. Then they can send their goons in and pick up all the people who are just wounded and send them off to jail for the rest of their lives without a dime to call the lawyer and torture them. By the way, again.
Peter, got to take a break for commercials. Don't hang up. I'm going to come back to you after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're talking with Peter in Los Angeles. We're talking about the fact that, yes, we're living in a police state. The government has arrogated to itself extraordinary and unconstitutional powers and authorities. The Bill of Rights is slowly being shredded. The Fourth Amendment is gone. They're listening to everything that you do on your computers and phones. The Fifth Amendment guarantee that the government will pay you for the use of your private property, which they do when they're eavesdropping on your computers and stuff. That's being ignored. The Second Amendment has been under attack for decades now, and they're trying to use the hate crime laws to stifle freedom of speech. And they're using these private social media corporations to do the censorship because they can't be sued under the First Amendment like the government can.
Yeah, that's right, Michael. And they have again. Not only are they eavesdropping on everything we do, they've given that to Israel.
Yes.
And
I imagine a lot of other people as well.
Yeah, in my opinion, Mike, you have to identify who these people are, and the source of everything in our system, and it's the system that's the enemy, really, is money.
Yes. And
so if you can print money, and like you can fix, like we've talked about, fix the stock market, the plunge protection team, the LIBOR, fixing the gold, fixing high-speed trading, fixing virtually every possible section of banking is fixed and collaborated. Look who controls that. Look who controls the media, who we've also talked about, and look who buys and controls all of our elections. Look at the people who are at the forefront of grabbing all the guns. Look at the people who are the forefront of stifling freedom of speech, where you can't even criticize them, because it's hate speech. And so, to me, that's a pretty identifiable group of people.
Unfortunately, it is.
And I don't think there's any way of getting around it. And you look at all the names from, if they don't get you from the intercepts or the bribery or buying the congressman, they'll get you to the Epstein or the hate speech or whatever. And it's a tiny group of people, but the source of power comes to the fact that they can print money out of nothing. And that's why there's so many of the billionaires who control everything. Even sports. Look at all the owners in sports. Look who they are. Look at their names, guys. Even sports. But we are a police state, and it gets worse by the day.
Yes.
And what they're not calling hate speech, Mike, is pretty interesting. When there'll be gangs of really thuggish black gangs picking on white victims, in public places and attacking them, and that's not a hate crime.
Yeah, they just had one of those.
You were in L.A. Yeah, I know, I know you were in L.A. for the Rodney King riots when I think it was 2,500 Korean businesses were burnt down because they were Korean businesses.
Yes.
And that was not because it was perpetrated by black mobs and Hispanic mobs. They didn't call that a hate crime. That's the biggest hate crime in American history, for Christ's sake. 25. Remember seeing like the whole horizon was fires.
Yes.
It's just, and because they can define what it is, they call that was not a hate crime. They can turn, the races against each other, and they're doing it all.
Yep.
So the immigration, all that's through all the wars that we've been put into and flooding Europe. Europe is, absolutely no more. The Great Replacement, I think, is what they call it. But yet, all those wars, which of course are the Israeli lobby, and the Israelis are cheerleading and doing everything they can through the media and everything else and money. None of those refugees they never go to Israel. They've got a wall. Yep, they got a wall. It's okay to have an identity for them, but it's not okay to have an identity for us.
Yeah, well, I mean, Israel's made no secret of the fact that they want to be the Jewish people, and they want everybody else to basically just get blended together and not have an identity. And that's why we have people like Soros, who are pushing for all of this, let's blur everybody together, and they'll all hug each other and sing Kumbaya, and all will be well, which of course has not worked out that way at all with the high crime rate, the rapes.
Yeah. that's become not only national policy, it's international policy.
Yes.
I mean, you can't turn, the EU will not allow European countries to say no to this border stuff. The refugees are flooding in. The source is the Middle East. Yeah.
All right, Peter, got to take a break for commercials. Thank you very much for the phone call. We will be right back with another caller. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the phones to Steve Elkins. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, you just refreshed my memory, Michael, about Fourth Amendment rights, privacy rights, illegal searches and seizures and surveillance on the people. And I remember that Donald Trump made such a stink, and rightfully so, about being spied on the Trump Tower by the Obama administration. But I guess exception to the rulers, it's okay if you're in his seat. But I'm really disappointed in him in many, many ways, and that's just one of many ways. The increased surveillance on the people, ramping it up, and except he wouldn't like it if somebody does it to him, but it's okay for us, and we're supposed to accept it, and I don't. So I'm just glad you reminded me of that, because I forgot all about that, the bugging at the Trump Tower, and how he said he was spied and bugged on, and but we're supposed to be silent about it and accept it. I just don't.
No, I don't accept it either. I mean, I don't have anything to hide, so I really don't care about what's going on. But if I had something to hide, I certainly know how to do it. And at my age, I'm just not doing that much.
Well, it just makes you wonder, with each administration, they just keep ramping up more surveillance and spying on the people. I mean, we are pretty much kind of in a police state right now, if you think about it. We really are.
I agree. I agree it's a police state. And all they got to do is find a way to talk to people out of their guns, and it's going to get a lot worse.
I agree. That's it, Mike. Thanks. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here, and the phone lines are now open, 800-313-9443. Okay, as you know, back on the 6th, India tried to soft land on the moon, and they had this lander called Vikram, and they think they have spotted it with the sensors on the Chandrayaan orbiter. But over this last weekend, NASA decided to send the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, which has much better camera gear, over the presumed landing site. They were unable to find the lander, and the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter Camera Instrument, or LROC, imaged the intended South Pole touchdown site for the lander, but long shadows in the area may be obscuring the silent Lunar Explorer. That's a big problem. There's a lot of perpetual shadow there at the South Pole. So we still don't know exactly what happened with that, but it's a good example of international cooperation when you get down to these things. Okay, speaking of NASA, you've probably heard on TV where NASA is saying they're going to return humans to the moon on 2024. Now, this is a deadline that was imposed by Trump, by the White House. But in a congressional subcommittee meeting, Kenneth Bowersox, who's the acting associate administrator for human exploration, said that NASA will do their best, but they're not going to make any guarantees that they can meet that deadline of 2024. Well, better to be safe than sorry. Take as much time as you need to make sure everything works. All right, there's an event coming up, and it's called the Climate Strike, where students are going to be let out of school to parade along the streets with all kinds of signs trying to resell the human-caused global warming myth. Now, Coalition Member of Parliament Craig Kelly, down in Australia, has told the Australian students planning to join tomorrow's climate strike that everything you are told is a lie. Facts are there is no link between climate change and drought. Polar bears are increasing in number, and today's generation is safer from extreme weather than at any other time in human history. And as a matter of fact, there was this video basically showing stuff that the climate activists don't want to know, and certainly don't want you to know, about how this much claimed link between CO2 and the number of hurricanes that show up, it doesn't exist, and how the world was really much hotter back in the 1930s. It was very cool in the 1990s. A lot of people moved south. Hey, we can go to Florida. It's not going to be too hot. But to show how this is all becoming a religion. And by the way, there was a court case in Great Britain in which it was declared that the belief in human-caused global warming does constitute a religion. There was another court case which requires teachers who are showing Al Gore's mockumentary, An Inconvenient Truth, to their class to first read off a list of proven misstatements in that documentary. So here in the United States, NBC, the National Broadcasting Castration, has created this online booth where you may confess your climate change sins anonymously. And I mean, that's ridiculous. It does show it's being peddled as a religion. Don't think. Just believe as you're told, and all will be well. But you know something? We have had 50 years of nonstop predictions about doom is upon us if we don't change the weather. And none of them have come true. But they still keep making the predictions. Back in 1967, they predicted a dire famine by 1975. That didn't happen. Salt Lake Tribune, November 17th, 1967. In the year 1969, everyone will disappear in a cloud of blue steam by 1989. Where they got the idea about the blue steam. Okay, let's see what we have here. On August 10th, 1969, the New York Times wrote an article saying that we would be in an ice age by 2000. And let's see here. Boston Globe, April 16th, 1970. Predicting that America would be subject to water rationing by 1974 and food rationing by 1980. Needless to say, that did not happen either. Redlands Daily Facts, October 6, 1970, again predicting a new ice age coming. Washington Post, July 9th, 1971, new ice age by 2070. We know the accuracy of the Washington Post. What can I tell you here? Okay, and NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, in October of 2015, is again saying there's a new ice age coming fast. Really just kind of weird out there. Is the planet getting warmer or colder? Can you guys make up your mind? The Guardian, January 29th, 1974, another ice age. And the reason for all those ice age predictions is they've been predicting melting ice caps and global warming going back to the 1920s. And I guess after all that time and it really didn't happen, they said, well, let's go the other way. We can sell newspapers if we predict an ice age here. Time Magazine, June 24th, 1974, ozone depletion, a great peril to life. This is when they discovered there was actually a hole in the ozone over Antarctica. Everybody panicked. They were saying that spray cans were responsible. And then it was discovered the hole has always been there. Alrighty, page down, page down, page down. Okay. NASA data graph in 1976 showing cooling. They don't know what they're doing. Well, what they're trying to do is stimulate fear, because fear will get them more money. Fear will get them media attention. You know, scientists are just as vulnerable as anybody else. And if a scientist comes on out and says, I've discovered this odd little property and it's really not all that important, well, he's not going to be on the media. He's not going to get any funding. If he comes on out and says, I spotted this odd little property and it's the end of the world, then he gets his money. He gets his media attention. New York Times book review, Acid Rain Kills Life in Lakes. The Noblesville Ledger, 10 years later, the U.S. government formed to study acid rain, basically concluded. I don't have that image here. Associated Press, September 6th, 1990. No end in sight to 30-year cooling trend. And back in the 1990s, it was cooling. In the early 1990s, then toward the end, it started warming up, and that's when Al Gore got together with his friends and investors. I mean, Ken Lay helped Al Gore set up that carbon trading system here. New York Times, January 5th, 1978. According to NASA satellite data, there's a slight warming trend. Back to global warming. Okay, drroyspencer.com. In 1988, he wrote, James Hansen forecasts increased regional drought in the 1990s. It's all doom and gloom, and it's designed to generate fear. The last really dry year in the Midwest was 1988. Recent years have been record wet. Okay. RealClimateScience.com, talking about Washington, D.C. days over 90 degrees Fahrenheit from 35 to 85. Stop to think that all those cars driving around the street, putting out heat from their internal combustion engines, might be the cause of that. If you read my article on ClimateGate, there's a very illustrative picture there, and it was this news article that said a record-setting hot temperature had been measured at thus and such city. And when you go look at that city where the actual weather station itself was located, it's in the middle of an airport with jet planes all around it belching out all kinds of hot gases. It's not an honest reckoning of the temperature. Okay, realclimatescience.com. The Maldives completely underwater in 30 years. That didn't work. And let's see. Agents, France Press, 1989, rising seas to obliterate the nations by 2000. I believe it's 2019 right now, and it did not happen. Associated Press, in 1989, New York City's West Side Highway underwater by 2019. Let's go on and on. Now, this one was a little more honest. Salon.com ran an article in 2001 saying that the climate models have failed. And they really have. And by the way, I always complain about the Weather Channel. We used it back on Oahu. It was very unreliable, and unfortunately, it's not doing any better here in Indiana. Although supposedly we get thunder showers this weekend here. Oh, I remember this one. CEI.org in 2000 ran an article. Children won't know what snow is. They'll have to look at pictures in history books or have their parents describe it. And that winter, they had a record snowfall. I remember the British Meteorological Office came on out and said it's going to be a snow-free winter. And it was a record snowfall. Seen from space, it looked like somebody had taken a can of white paint to the entire British Isles. The Independent in 2002, famine in 10 years. That didn't happen. The Guardian in 2004, Britain to have Siberian climate by 2020. One more year to go on that one. Okay. The Guardian in 2008, Arctic will be ice-free by 2018. I wonder if that's where Al Gore got that idea. And by the way, they were both wrong. Yeah, here it is, 2008. Al Gore warns of ice-free Arctic by 2013. So, still there. Ice is still there. All right, back in 2009, Prince Charles says there's only 8 years left to save the planet. We're doomed, we're doomed, we're doomed. And in 2009, the British Prime Minister says there's only 50 days to save the planet from catastrophe. You wonder why people are not really paying attention to the news anymore, why they don't trust the corporate media and especially politicians. Alrighty, let me do this and this. Alrighty, we're coming up here on our last commercial break, and then we'll be back here to do the last segment of our program today. So stay tuned. And, well, actually, the music should be here shortly, but I'm going to keep on talking so we don't do dead air. And maybe I should put on some of Claire's music. The best of Claire Rivero, a retrospective. All right, there's the music. All right, back in a few minutes to close out the show. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, last segment of our program today. And, pardon me, apparently some economists are very concerned about the WeWork SEC filing. And apparently it's worse than a lot of people really think. Now, Mike Pompeo, of course, is tooling around Saudi Arabia, and one of the reporters who was with him asked what I'm sure Pompeo felt was an impertinent question. How is it after spending $80 million a year on air defense, the Saudis weren't able to track missiles that are crossing the Persian Gulf? And Pompeo came on out and said, we've seen air defense systems all around the world have mixed success. Some of the finest in the world don't always pick things up. So he went on to suggest that Saudi Arabia simply doesn't have enough U.S.-made weapons to stop such an attack, and that Washington will work with the kingdom to alleviate this problem, no matter what it costs. Now, here's the problem I have. There were supposedly 12 drones and 7 cruise missiles. Not one of these anti-air systems got a return on the radar. Not one. It's a 100% failure rate. And it's an embarrassment for the United States because a big part of that petrodollar deal is that Saudi Arabia sells their oil for dollars, which increases demand for U.S. dollars, and in exchange, the U.S. will protect Saudi Arabia, which they failed miserably at doing over the weekend. Another reason to wonder if this really was a false flag that was allowed to happen. So Russia's salespeople are out there saying, Patriot's no good. You need the S-400 here. And let's see. 100% of 10-year revenue growth will be consumed by Social Security, medical entitlements, and interest. In other words, we've hit the end of the run. Actually hit the end of the run. China supposedly is losing $97 million a day due to the attacks on the Saudi Arabia oil facilities. So they're not happy about what went there. Well, there's an article here, and this is in Investment Watch blog. And it's saying, I've got to give President Trump credit, as it appears he's once again going to reject the neocon warmonger demand of militarily striking Iran, and then follows up by saying, watch for the false flags to intensify. People who want war, they're not going to stop now. So we'll see what happens here. Remember that police officer, the 2 police officers who set an innocent man on fire and beat him? No jail time. The system doesn't eat its own. And finally, bringing up the bottom here, we're a nation that is $22.5 trillion in debt. Okay, and that's 106% of gross domestic product. Someday that debt has to be paid. Okay, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. Please stay tuned for John Stadmiller. And again, take what you learn here, share it with everybody that you know. Please donate to RBN, donate to whatreallyhappened.com. And we will be back tomorrow, Friday,